The week 3. Let's do this. Last week we had some readings, but I didn't get through them. But this time we didn't have a prompt, but it doesn't matter. We're still gonna make a video on the readings that we have. So I got the feeling that the readings that we had for this week were mostly towards microaggressions and how society or how our time in society has made us who we are and how we can change those roles, look at those roles, and like how we can define those roles into things that we can think about, and how we can use those roles as a better way rather than just stick with them and just move on, as explained by the cycle of socialization, which I will get to later on. I wanted to start off with Lee Ann Bell's first reading and how she talked about um, the different ways that there's like types of oppressions and types of racism. And the thing that stood out to me was how a lot of the movements that happened were based on another. And so we see that the civil rights movement was the base of many of the movements that happened afterwards. Like we saw the gay rights movement, the disabilities acts movement. So that really intrigued me, and I found it really interesting that it is because of a movement that happened that other movements also happen, and they're usually on some not comparing, but they sort of tell the differences between the two groups, or the groups that are getting oppressed and the group that has an advantage. And so, as in the civil rights movement, we saw that the minorities, or mostly the minorities wanted equal rights, and the majority were the majority of the citizens, which were the white people in the U.S., we saw that they were getting that benefit of being in the U.S., but the civil rights movement wanted that to go away, and so that everybody would be treated equally. And then we also saw how in the gay rights movement, how the LGBTQ community was being oppressed and not being represented equally and properly, and they wanted proper representation, just like the heterosexual people, and also the disabled rights movement, which also, again, the disabled people also wanted the equal treatment. Um, a thing that stood out to me in that reading, one sentence was I quote, "A father's economic status continues to be the best predictor of the status of his offspring, a situation that worsens as economic inequality grows and the possibilities for social mobility steadily declines." So you see that you can right now that we predict, oh, this person is going to be like this when they grow up because their parents have these values and their roles. And so this sort of stood out to me, and I got interested because I'm I thought to myself that that's not true. You don't you it doesn't have to be that way, and that people can do other things and end up differently than how their past generations have been, and completely redefine it. And also, the another thing that stood out to me in that reading was the binary categorization, like heterosexual, homosexual, man, woman, um, all the other stuff, like black, white, and so there. And I noticed that there isn't necessarily those binaries. There's people in between. There are people mixed, and there's not just one way of looking at it. So moving on to the cycle of socialization, I noticed that the word brainwash was in the cycle of socialization, and at first I was thinking to myself, I don't like the word because it seems like I knew that information, but then I got that new information was put into my mind so that I would think differently. But then once I read on, it made more sense because it wasn't brainwashed in that sense, in the sense that is used in the media now, and that's how I got that viewpoint. But now that brainwash was how people were meant to play those roles because the society told them to, and so they didn't know that, oh, maybe without gaining that knowledge that they would have that other experience. And also microaggressions, I watched those two videos and they got me really thinking, and I was like, wow, some of them have actually happened to a lot of us. And I didn't realize it, but now that I think about it, I noticed that a lot of the people, when I came here for a year in Corvallis for high school, I went there, and the questions they asked me when I told them that, oh, I moved here from Dubai, they were like, hey, did you have a Ferrari? Did you have a big house? Do you have a lot of money? And I was like, not actually, no, because not everybody is like that, and whoever is, they show it off because they're proud of it. And now that I think about it, it really hurt me, and it really got me thinking, and I want to like help end that stereotype that there is, that all of the Arabs or all of the people from that region are just rich and have money just flowing out of their pockets or growing in trees. So yeah, that's the end of my blog for this week. See y'all next week.